Today, we're dealing with a passage of scripture found in John chapter 4. In this passage of scripture, Jesus engages in a conversation with a Samaritan woman. Now, the first miracle is the fact that Jesus is dealing with a Samaritan woman. In the Jewish and the Samaritan tradition, the two had nothing to do with each other. No good Jew would be found talking to any Samaritan. Furthermore, no Jewish male would associate with a Samaritan female. But Jesus, being who Jesus is, engages in a conversation with the Samaritan woman. Now, the Samaritan woman proposes a question to Jesus. She says, "You Jews worship in Jerusalem, but we Samaritans worship God right here on this mountain." In other words, the Samaritan woman says, "Jesus, I'm confused in where it is that we ought to worship God." Now Jesus, he answers and says, "A time is coming and now has come that you will worship God neither in Jerusalem nor on this mountain, but the true worshipers will worship God in spirit and in truth." Now, what is Jesus talking about in worshiping God in spirit and in truth? Worshiping God in spirit, as God is spirit, involves understanding what worship is. You see, worship has nothing to do with your status or your position in the church. Worship has nothing to do with who you may be in society. Worship has everything to do with your intimacy with God. What do you mean, your intimacy with God? Your intimacy with God has to do with your communication with God. When we learn how to communicate with God, we then can understand what worship is. So worshiping in spirit and in truth is worshiping God in a matter that is real. See, we need to understand that God created us, and He created us differently. Therefore, our communication is going to be different. The way I worship God may be a little different than the way you worship God, but as long as we're being real with God, it does not matter exactly how we worship. Throughout the Bible, people worship God differently. David danced before the Lord, and that's all right. It's okay to get your dance on. But see, some people, they are more subtle in their worship with God. Does that make them any less of a worshiper? No. As long as they have found the intimacy that God has required of them. So Jesus is telling this Samaritan woman, as long as you worship in spirit and in truth, it is a form of worship that is appealing to God. It doesn't matter if it is in the church. It doesn't matter if it's on your job. It doesn't matter if it's at school. It does not matter if it's at your home. It does not matter if it's in your closet, as long as your heart is open and you are real with God. You see, when we learn to be intimate with God, it's easier for us to bring our cares and our concerns to God and leave them with God, because if we are actively communicating with God, we know that God will provide every one of our needs. How is your worship? Is your worship in spirit and in truth? Are you more concerned with what your worship looks like than you are concerned with the communication you're having with the Creator? Jesus said a time is coming, and now has come, that the true worshipers will worship God in spirit and in truth. Let us strive to worship God in spirit and in truth.